Good afternoon. This is Jeff from Arcanum Holistic Clinic, and I've just pulled out this fertility article from my newsfeed. Just came out about 10 days ago, April 21st, and it's called Six Ways to Boost Women's Fertility. And this is from the website reportshealthcare.com, and it's written by Florence Wright. Actually, there's tons of really good pointers in this article, so it's actually going to make my job easier today. I'm just going to mostly share all the good points, and as usual, I will fill in the gaps where there is either missing information or misleading information. So let's go through what we've got here. So as the title says, there are 6 points, but then there's an extended section at the bottom of a lot of beneficial fertility foods, which is one of the reasons I wanted to bring this article forward to you. So let's have a look first through the 6 points, and then we'll get into the foods. So what do we have here? So the first point about boosting women's fertility is stress management. Now, this is a very common point. We see it in actually almost all the articles about tips on fertility, and I think for good reason. I think it is very true. It's certainly in our experience that a lot of the issue with infertility is more from stress, more from more particularly how women and men too hold on to stress, and how that interferes with the process of fertility. And what I do like in this point is she does specifically make the point that, let me just read the highlight here: stress can enhance the chances of infertility by inducing the production of hormones like prolactin and cortisol, so otherwise known as the stress hormones. And it says these hormones reduce ovulation and induce infertility. So that's absolutely true. The only thing I would add is to get even more specific about what we do in our natural fertility protocol in terms of stress, whether those stresses are current, like happening now, in the person's life, or whether they're old stresses or shocks or traumas that are still in their system from some time in the past. Even if the source of the stress isn't present now, the effects are still there. So if you're already in our natural fertility program, you'll find out more about how we approach this in our natural fertility book. And if you're not yet, you actually can download that book for free at www.naturalfertilitybook.com. So moving on to point number 2, again, this is a very common recommendation in the fertility recommendation articles. And point 2 is simply about exercise. They talk about some things like walking and yoga, improving blood circulation. Again, that's all true. They talk about the increased blood circulation, increasing blood flow to the ovaries and uterus. All very true. But what I would also point to again in our natural fertility book is we get a lot more specific about exactly how we approach the topic of fertility exercise, or I should say exercise within your fertility plan. And we, just to mention briefly, we do go specifically into how we recommend that cardio exercise is done, as well as its counterpoint of strength training exercise. So again, a good point. I'm just adding a little bit of extra detail there. Jumping down to point number 4, they talk about hydration, and that is certainly one of the most important things for fertility health. It touches on, well, so many things, everything from all the detox organs in your body, and again, back to the blood and the circulation, moving the hormones properly through the body, and moving the nutrition that all flow throughout the bloodstream. All of this is extremely important. And again, we do have a whole section of this in our fertility book to go into even more detail. But yeah, definitely we would agree with point number 4. Now, point number 5 is funny. It's also one that comes up in any number of fertility articles. It's basically a recommendation for a multivitamin supplement, which is not a terrible recommendation, but it's in my mind it's kind of misleading. Now I'll forgive this article in particular, because as we get down to the bottom of the article, they are going to give quite a wide range of good nutritional advice and some specific foods and the fertility nutrients that they contain. So in this case, I will forgive this article as I'm saying, but in most of the articles, when they recommend a multivitamin supplement, it's kind of a weak recommendation, and they're just kind of covering up, an otherwise weak knowledge, a weak level of recommendation about actual healthy diet, healthy fertility diet, where, in our emphasis, we always put food way above supplementation in importance, and then we'll use vitamins, and we'll use supplements as just that, as the word is supposed to mean, as a supplement to what is already a healthy diet, but yeah, not as something which is somehow magically going to take someone's nutritional status to a place that it's never really been before. So yeah, as I say, getting into this final section, and it's a little bit more extended, and I think that's very good. They leave point 6 for last. I think that's probably just because they did take up so much space with all the food. So let's dive into some of the details. I won't touch on everything here. Let's just let me see, what have I got here. Well, I'm just going to briefly mention their first food, which is whole milk. We do make a very distinct recommendation about milk and dairy products in general, especially in the fertility context. But what we do recommend is, as whenever possible, to access raw milk, unpasteurized milk. And we do go into greater detail about that in the book, but I just want to drop that point in here just because it is so important. The pasteurized milk does cause many health problems and fertility problems. And it's almost like, well, let's put it this way, or to keep it more simple, when you do pasteurize dairy, you take what's actually an extremely, a highly beneficial, a very healthy food in nature. We even categorize it as a superfood, just packed with nutritional factors and a real living energy. That's one of the most important factors in food. But when you pasteurize it, you kill the enzymes, you kill that life energy in the milk, and you give the body something that it actually has to put in a lot of energy to process now in its non-optimal form. So anyways, as I said, I just wanted to keep that as a quick point about milk and getting the unpasteurized or raw version as much as you're able to access that. They do recommend sesame seeds, particularly for the high amount of zinc. Zinc, of course, being a highly necessary and essential nutrient when it comes to fertility, both for men and for women. And we do cover some more details about that in our natural fertility book. This is interesting. This isn't something I knew about before. They talk about cinnamon and its role in insulin resistance, as well as how it helps the reproductive organs. So that's kind of interesting. I didn't know about that myself before. But yeah, you can certainly look into that, especially if you're dealing with what they talk about here with polycystic ovary syndrome, and as well as it says, it's just a kind of a general tonic for the reproductive organs. The next week start getting into some of the seafood, again, super highly beneficial for fertility, and they talk about salmon in particular, which is high in omega-3 fatty acids. What they don't mention, also, the seafoods are very high in vitamin D as well, super important in fertility. And they also highlight something highly important. That's the high amount of zinc that's found in oysters. So again, that will be a very highly beneficial food in your fertility plan. Getting into the fruits. So the first one they mention is the avocado, and again, similar to some of the reasons I was just pointing out with the salmon and the seafood, is really the healthy fat and oil content in a food like an avocado. And in general, again, we do go into greater detail of this in our book, is the fats are so important for hormonal health, and basically the way that we absorb sunlight and vitamin D and convert that into cholesterol, and how that fits into our whole hormonal production cycle. So anyways, avocado fits right in there into that whole model of healthy fats and oils. Berries is something they're highlighting, particularly around the antioxidants. I have seen a little bit of this before, and I can't even remember if we have this mentioned in the book or not. I'll have to go look at it myself to remind myself. But they talk about figs as being a particular fertility food, and they're particularly linking that with the iron and how that's linked with a healthy ovulation and healthy cycle. I'm going to skip down a little bit. We get further down, we get into the green leafy vegetables. So again, we're back to the antioxidants again, the folic acid, which is a super important fertility food, manganese, iron, calcium, vitamin A. So anyways, just a whole range, lots of minerals. And the way we come at that in our fertility book, we tie this, like the green leafy vegetables, particularly in with the, it's a little bit hinted at here, but the whole mineral balance in the body, and particularly how that leads into getting what we call a proper fertility pH level, which is the first chapter in our book, really getting that baseline of your pH. So anyways, the green leafy vegetables will feed into that most important thing of fertility, and which we suggest people in our fertility plan are measuring on quite a regular basis to make sure their pH is in the right range. Moving a little further ahead, they're getting into yams. Also, they're talking about the antioxidants, both vitamins A and C there, and how that relates to the health of the eggs. I'm going to skip a few things. We do have seaweed that has some relationship to what I said above about the benefits of the seafood, the salmon and things like that. But it also, has, as it says here, some essential nutrients enhancing the function of the liver, kidneys, and bladder. So getting right into the whole reproductive tract and some of the associated organs. Now this, I'm really glad to see in this article as well. You actually, funnily enough, you don't see this in a lot of the fertility advice articles, but the foods to avoid, the first one they have is soy. And yes, we have a big section on avoiding soy in our book, and they definitely have that here, which is a good point. They talk about, essentially they're talking about how it disrupts the kind of the estrogen-like effects, the whole hormonal cycle in the body. But yeah, the soy foods, and now there are some exceptions to this rule. There are healthy soy foods, and those are usually the more traditionally fermented foods. So things like traditionally fermented soy sauce, and the Japanese food of tempeh, and miso as well. So these are soy foods, but they're actually healthy. Now most of the commercial soy foods you're going to find are in this unhealthy category, so definitely be very careful of that. Now here's a point where I take issue with this article. They talk about avoiding saturated fats, and I believe that's likely coming from a lot of the nutritional myths that have come around, how supposedly saturated fats are supposed to be unhealthy, and animal foods, animal proteins are unhealthy. That's the total opposite of what we look at with fertility, and in particular, we look at the whole diet recommended by Dr. Price, well, for health in general, but for fertility in particular. And yeah, it's absolutely essential that there's a good basis of healthy animal fats and proteins in the diet. So I would give you the opposite advice from in this point here. Now they do advise against refined sugars, against cigarettes, caffeine, alcohol, against being underweight or overweight. So again, fairly common advice in all the fertility articles. So I'm not going to add too much there. It's fairly common wisdom, but yeah, definitely important to keep these points in mind. So as I say, I wanted to present this article. There's so many good points in it, and I thank you for joining me, and I will see you again the next time.